Good evening, everyone.
Oh, good evening.
Good evening. Mayor, I see all your council members except David.
Okay, and we are, excuse me, we're live and streaming.
You got it.
Okay, I'm sure David will sign in shortly. Why don't we go ahead and call our meeting to order? Let's see. We have Miss Laurie as our clerk tonight, everyone. Laurie, I think we can, we've been doing this electronic roll call, and there's Mr. Lesby. We have a unanimous attendance this evening. Good evening, David.
Good evening.
Each council member received a copy of the minutes of our last, excuse me. Let me back up. I got in such a hurry to get started that I think we should first pause for a moment of silence. And then Mark, would you please lead us in the pledge to the flag?
Now for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mark. Somebody about 5 items from now would have backed me up to that, and I would have even been more embarrassed at that point. So now we can eliminate the roll call, and you do have a copy of the minutes from our last meeting if you'd like to look those over for any corrections or additions.
Mayor, I make a motion that we accept.
Thank you.
Second.
Mayor, I second it with, on number 1, that Councilman Hambrick's name is spelled correctly.
Oh, well, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm going to accept that second. And with that change noted, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Minutes are approved. Each of you should have also received a copy of our latest check register. If you could indicate that you have received that. Thank you. Under public comments, we do have some folks on with us tonight for public comment. Let's see, Ms. Miller.
Yes,
There you
sir.
Hi there.
Hi.
We're at the public comment portion of our meeting, and if you'd like to address the council, why don't you take several minutes and do so?
Okay. I want to thank you all for letting me join. I have a very big interest in this meeting because you're going to be introduced to an addendum or something regarding the Officer Stanfield. I've been working with him for over a year now about the dog running, and I have a personal interest because I have a tiny Pomeranian and he was attacked by my neighbor's dog, and because it was not on a leash, and she does not want this dog on a leash ever. So my dog was on a leash when it was attacked, and the vet said it would have killed him if it wasn't for his fur. He's a Pomeranian, so he's got a lot of fur. Anyway, he was on medication for 2 weeks, and I it's very hard for them to do anything in the city and go any further with it. Now, if it's in the county, they can actually give a ticket and they would have to go to court for a running dog or a vicious dog or anything. So I'm here to support that effort to get that changed, because I really wouldn't like a child to get hurt by this dog or any other dog. And it's an ongoing thing. And I thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thank you. For council's benefit, to help put that in context, you're going to hear first reading of an ordinance later in our meeting that will give animal control more, I started to say more teeth. I'm sorry, I did not mean that pun.
Oh my
That will
God.
give animal
That's a good
control
one.
more authority. So thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
Mhm. Laurie, did we have any others that signed on?
I do not see Miss Smith signed on.
Okay. We thought we would have Miss Anita Smith, but it doesn't look like she signed on with us. Andrew, if you see Miss Smith in the waiting room later, if you'll let us know, we'd be glad to hear from her.
Sir.
Let's see, under mayor's comments, several things. Had a very successful thriller downtown last week. And my screen is telling me my internet connection is unstable. So if I come across garbled, somebody wave at me. This Friday will be spooktacular, where the young children come downtown from 11 o'clock to 2 o'clock. And then, of course, this Sunday is Halloween. We're still getting calls at City Hall with questions about when trick or treat will be. Each of you all saw the email and responded appropriately to that remarkable number of tires that were recycled and taken to the state facility. Even if some of those tires came from other communities, that's still 25,000 tires, every one of which can be a mosquito breeding opportunity. And so that was a big deal. And Super Recycling Day was this last Saturday. Numbers were down a little bit from last year. A little over 600 vehicles came through out of Toyota. And our partners at Toyota were really pleased with the way that turned out. After a lot of waiting and hard work, I'm pleased to tell you that it looks like we have finally gotten the last bit of funding in place that we needed to start our West Main Street TAP project, our beautification project that we've talked about for, I think, 5 years. We've finally gotten full funding. We'll probably bring back a contract to the council within a meeting or so for approval of that contract, or the contractor to actually begin work. But we're going to go ahead and move forward with the project. The initial repairs have to be on the walls of the viaduct itself, and they can do that without impeding traffic at all. So, and they can work in cooler weather. So we're going to go ahead and get that project started. And then maybe after Christmas, focus more on the roadway improvements but finally some action on the TAP grant. For all the council members' benefit, but particularly Willow, the questions about ARPA and appropriate guidance. We have developed a revised plan in accordance with your request to make one that actually fit the calendar and made it in the future, not in the past. That revised plan has been prepared and posted to our website. That part of our website also has active links for any citizens that you want to direct there. It has active links to all the various ARPA information that we know that's available. So if people want to self-educate, they can begin to do that. There's also a link, Willow, to where we will send folks to an electronic survey and begin to gather opinion that way. There's also a marketing effort planned to use QR codes and maybe some posters at the library and posters in different high location places where folks can easily get to this information. So
Thank you.
that's been underway. You might take a look and see if that begins to get close to what you had in mind.
Okay, thank you so much, Mayor.
Yes, ma'am. Let's see. You will have an update on wastewater treatment plant number 1. I'm sure that's on everybody's mind. But that will be a part of Chase's report. So just wanted to make sure that you knew that'll be addressed, but will be done so in Chase's report. Significant piece of information for the council. Our Public Works Department has been notified by the landfill that they cannot accept our garbage after Friday. That's consistent with the landfill closing on October the 31st. What had seemed like future events are now upon us. So we have been notified of that. Robert has already met with and been on site with Rumpke at their transfer station to make sure we're completely ready for that following Monday for our tipping to go to the Rumpke pad right next to us. There'll be no very lower transportation cost, but a significantly higher tipping cost. That we hope we only get exposed to this additional expense for a couple of months. But as expected, this is now becoming real, and the landfill is notifying their customers. And I think for right now, that takes us back only to what's printed under mayor comments. I'm making a number of board appointments tonight. I think you have a municipal order to that effect. And Devin, I do not have that municipal order in front of me. So if there are questions, I'm going to have to ask Devin to help with those.
Yeah, Mayor, it's an executive order appointing Rhett Shirley to the Planning Commission. And you'll note that Rhett was serving on the Board of Adjustment. So the next appointment is an appointment of Frank Allen to the Board of Adjustment to complete Rhett's term and then to serve his first full term. So he's being appointed to complete those next 2 months and then for a first term to end December 31st, 2025.
Thank you. Is there a motion for approval?
Motion, Mayor.
Thank you,
Second.
Tammy. And thank you, Will. Second by Willa. If there are any questions, it's interesting on Mr. Shirley's case, he had expressed real interest in being on the Planning and Zoning Commission several years ago when he first wanted to serve. And we had recommended that a term on the Board of Adjustments, Greg, would be perfect training to not go into that P&Z experience completely cold. So this is a case where we reached back down to the Board of Adjustments to get that training, and I think Rhett will be a good commission member for that.
Yes, Mayor, I agree with you on that.
It's not a requirement for service, but it sure is a good training ground. If there are no questions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Let's see, item 7 on our agenda, GMWSS. Chase, you've got quite a list this evening. Devin and I were looking at your list and wondered if you're comfortable, if we might ask you to go A through L with kind of explanations, willing to take those as a whole unless a council member needs to pull one out, or Chase, if you think one needs to be pulled out, and then move you on to the more important or the other issues.
Mayor, I had the exact same thought, and I was going to ask council if I could proceed in just that manner. So that's what I'll do.
Okay.
I'll make a motion for A through L to accept.
All right. Todd, hold that for just a minute, if you would, please. And,
Okay.
and I'm going to make Chase earn his keep because a couple of those I want him to explain.
I will be ready to explain all of them, but I appreciate it, Councilmember Stone. Thanks for your confidence. First, we have a proposal for professional services, and this is required for our wastewater treatment plant project. These services are for bond counsel and are required for the short-term and long-term financing plans for the project. That will be a bond anticipation note, a revenue anticipation note, and the actual bond issuance. So this is for all of the bond counsel work for all three of those efforts. So we, working with our municipal advisor, Baird, we developed a scope of services for these, services, and reached out to 4 firms. Mark Franklin of Dinsmore and Stoll submitted the lowest proposal at $73,000. And we've worked with Mark on previous financial efforts where bond counsel was required. So we are recommending Mark Franklin in this scope of services to council. Item B is a purchase order for Kentucky Engineering Group in the amount of $69,930 for design services on wastewater plant number 2 grit removal system. Anticipated budget for the engineering task was $84,900, and this is a budgeted project for FY22. Item C is a purchase order for Judy Construction in the amount of $167,800 for a project involving painting and valve replacement at wastewater plant number 2. If you notice in the documentation, we considered the low bid as non-responsive. The apparent low bid was well under the engineer's opinion of cost. Our design consultant, along with our staff, had concerns about the amount of money in the low construction bid. Just that there wasn't enough there. Since this is a wastewater plant 2 project, it's funded by Toyota. Our Toyota liaison shared our concerns and recommended awarding this to the second low bidder. And that was Judy Construction. The anticipated budget for this project was just under $180,000. So we're still under budget. And this is a budgeted project again in FY22. Items D and E are a purchase order and project recommendation for leak eliminators in the amount of $20,622.30. This is for water line improvements in Stamping Ground. This project was designed in-house and it is intended to help with fire flow pressures in Stamping Ground. We're using leak through our annual services unit price contract that is bid out. Leak's quote is for labor and equipment, and we will be purchasing material separately. Anticipated budget for this project was $40,000, and so this came in under, and this again is another budgeted project that we're getting started on. Excuse me for just one second. Item F is a bid recommendation for sludge removal and disposal for wastewater plants 1 and 2. Following up what the mayor said in his comments, our current vendor will no longer be able to provide service to Georgetown Municipal at the end of this month. Put that letter from the vendor in the council packet. We received bids for these services in early October with Rumpke of Kentucky providing the low bid. We must have these services. There has to be a place for the sludge to go after it's treated. This is a service that's included in our budget, our annual budget every year. We increased our budget for these services this year in FY22, knowing that our bids would likely come in higher than what we've had in the past. The Rumpke bid came in under our budgeted amount though. So we were pleased with the result of that bid process. Item G is purchase order to Southern Sales in the amount of $11,777.40. This purchase order was required for emergency repairs at our Cherry Blossom Pump Station. This purchase order was approved by Mayor Prather as an emergency. This is why you don't see any bids or quotes on there. We had to get this done quickly. I did this as an emergency purchase order. Item H is the same, another emergency purchase order for Cayman Industrial in the amount of $10,660.42 for emergency repairs at wastewater plant 1 on an aerator gearbox. We were able to make some calls and get quick quotes on this one for comparison. Cayman submitted the lowest price. Again, an emergency PO approved prior to this meeting. We moved forward with both of these repairs, items G and H, before the normal approval process with the board and council to prevent wastewater discharge and prevent possible regulatory violation. Item I is a purchase order to Evoqua in the amount of $210,622.50, and this is for our resin change out. This is a budgeted purchase and a sole source material that we have to have for our treatment process at Plant 2. Item J is a purchase order to Judy Construction in the amount of $229,760.81 for work performed on the Plant 1 upgrade and expansion. That was work period partially through September and October. Items K and L are purchase orders for $41,244 for enterprise fleet management. First is a truck replacement, and the second is an addition to the fleet, needing one additional truck. Both trucks are budgeted in the FY22 budget and purchased through Enterprise, our fleet manager, through the state unit price contract. So I will pause there and ask if there's any questions related to items A through L.
Hearing none, Mr. Sohn, is that a motion?
Yes, it is.
Thank you, Tom.
Second, Mayor.
Oh, Connie, thank you. All right.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chase. That was a good explanation of all those. If there are no questions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Thank you. Then Chase, if you could move down to item M, your update on wastewater plant number 1.
I'll wrap M and N together, and they go together for an update for the council on the current status of wastewater plant number 1 upgrade and expansion. The mayor, the board of commissioners, the CAO, city attorney, as well as our legal counsel have all been made aware of our current situation that I'm going to brief you on. And Mike Scoggin already printed some of the factual information last Friday, at least on the news graphic website. So you may already know a little bit about where we are. And you know, this project was awarded in late February of this year, and notice to proceed was issued March 25th. So Judy Construction is roughly 6 months into the construction period. On September 2nd, representatives from our design firm, GRW, informed me that they had discovered an issue related to the structural design of a number of different structures on the project. GRW, I'll just say, from September 2nd to today, they've been very honest and upfront, transparent, that they came to understand there was an issue, and they've been upfront with their intention to address the issue. So there are 16 structures on this project, and we believe up to 7 of them may be affected. And the best way I know to explain this issue, not being a structural engineer myself, is that fluid containing tank and channel structures must have analysis under all loading conditions. So for example, the main structure in the new wastewater plant will have 4 fluid containing or retaining structures. And the design must be, again, analyzed under every loading condition. So you'd start off by analyzing with all 4 chambers full. Then you proceed with analyzing with your structural design with chamber 1 full and chambers 2 through 4 empty. Then you'd move on to chamber 2 full, 1, 3, and 4 empty. Then you do combinations. Chambers 1 and 2 are full and 3 or 4 empty. And you do all of those. I'm just mentioning some of them. And you analyze for every possible condition. Then you repeat that with different conditions outside of the structures, such as your groundwater conditions, whether groundwater table is up or whether it's down. Ultimately, what we have come to be informed by GRW is that analysis was incomplete and all the scenarios weren't analyzed. So what is the result? There are structural deficiencies in the design that was bid back at the beginning of the year. That's the worst news we could hear, but that's what the news is. This is not a problem created by Georgetown Municipal or Judy Construction. The contractor's been building exactly what was designed. Georgetown Municipal and GRW concurred that a stop work order must be issued to Judy. That was back on September 9th. So what actions are we taking at this point to get this project back on track? First, in order to fully understand the magnitude of the issues, GRW as well as Georgetown Municipal, we've agreed that a third-party independent structural engineer that specializes in wastewater treatment, structural design, and forensics must be retained directly by Georgetown Municipal at the cost of GRW. The third-party engineer is going to have to do multiple things. First, they're going to have to review the entire structural design as it is in the current state that it was bid back at the beginning of the year. So they're going to review from a structural standpoint the structural design as it is today. And then from there, they'll determine the nature and magnitude of any design deficiencies on the structure. Concurrently, GRW is performing the same review internally. They've been working on that since they discovered the issue. And GRW has also retained their own structural design subconsultant to review and check all the design and analysis. So we have 3 structural engineers working this problem. After our third-party engineer and GRW determine any and all deficiencies, GRW will recommend corrective actions, and all corrective actions will have to be reviewed and approved by our third-party engineer. So this is double, if not triple, confirmation territory that we're moving in the right direction. Currently, Georgetown Municipal and when we have the recommended corrective actions and we've all agreed on those, we're all confident in those actions, we will implement those corrective actions to the contract through Judy Construction through the change order process. Currently, Georgetown Municipal and our council are working with GRW, their council, and their liability insurer to work through the process that I've described. And GRW has been put on notice in writing, verbally as well, that we do expect all costs related to the design deficiencies and delays to be incurred by GRW, not our organization, not our ratepayers. At this time, I don't know how long the corrective actions are going to take to design and negotiate with both GRW and Judy Construction. And at this time, I don't know how much those corrective actions are going to cost. But again, we will be demanding that all those costs are incurred by GRW. This was solely a design mistake, and it's unfortunate because I realize and I sympathize that mistakes happen. We're all human. This is just unfortunate. It's so unfortunate that this mistake is going to cost us so much in time and the cost of the corrective actions. So My goal is to get Judy back to work ASAP with the corrected design that we have confidence in. We want to minimize this delay. So with that, I want to stop and hear questions from the council.
I have some questions.
Yes, ma'am.
So I just want to make sure I have a good understanding of what you just said and what I've been reading about. So GRW, the design firm, discovered their own design flaws. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And then because of that discovery, they are going to incur all of the costs of the corrected design implementation and any costs for overseeing the corrective action. Is that correct?
Ma'am, yes, ma'am. That is what we are working toward currently.
Okay, and if, let's say, how will this affect, I know you said that the timeline and how this will affect the timeline based on how long all of this will take. Do you anticipate that this is going to erode our ability to be able to keep this wastewater treatment plant at top efficiency? And what if we have, because of this delay, major problems? Will their insurance take care of that as well under the corrective action?
First of all, I think to answer your question, and I want to make sure I understand it correctly, that corrective actions, does that mean we're going to get a plant right out of the gate that was not designed to maximum efficiency? Do I understand that question correctly?
Well, I'm more concerned about if something happens to the plant in the meantime while they're trying to make these corrective actions.
So the existing plant is functional. And as you heard earlier, we had an emergency repair at that earlier.
Right.
And
that's why I'm worried.
Yes, ma'am. This is going to cause a delay, and that means we have to keep that plant operational for longer than we want to. And that would be what I would consider part of damages from delays related to this mistake.
Okay, good. That's my question.
We would seek compensation from GRW and its insurer. But to what I thought previously, what the question was, is let me assure the council and the public right now, these corrective actions, we're not designing a Band-Aid. We're not going to do that. The corrective actions are going to have to, the plant is going to have to be as good, as well designed as what we thought it was 2 months ago. And that's just before we proceed, that's the level of confidence that I'm going to have, and that I assure you that the Board of Commissioners will have to have before we are ready to turn this all back loose.
Thank you, Chase.
Hey, Chase, just to follow up on Willow's question, I know that they're going to address the immediate design deficiencies and take liability for those, but what about liability in the future? What if we go, 5 years and 10 years in the future, and we have issues related to this design deficiency that pop up? Does their liability end when they fix this, or is there going to be something that we can have that will not release them from liability in the future for issues that are related to this?
That's a great question, Councilmember Hampton. I'm going to have to get more information on that. Again, we're working with our counsel, Sturgill Turner, and that's something that will have to be addressed, whether it's an extended warranty, whether the warranty, just as their certification of the project as professional engineers, that extends. But as far as specifics of how that will work, I don't have an answer at this time.
Mayor, can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, what kind with the problems, how far will that set us off our timetable? Do we know yet?
No, ma'am, I do not have an answer for that on a specific revised schedule. That's going to take me some time to get because I don't know till we get our third-party firm retained, which is the next item of business, the last item of business. We've got to work with them on schedule, but in negotiating this proposal with them, they know that this has to go to the top of their list on their schedule and their workflow. Another part of this is we're working with the contractor on their critical path work items related to the structure. We know what structures they need to have essentially cleared first so they can get back to their critical path of construction. And we're going to send, we know the first 3 structures that they want cleared. So those will be the first 3 that we send to our third-party engineer, get those working first, get the answers on those. We send those back to Judy Construction, and then we buy ourselves some time to finish up with the remaining structures.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Chase, so I understand that you don't have a timeline. There's no way you can know that, but do you have an idea how long the analysis will take?
With respect to the first 3 structures, I'm hoping no more than 4 weeks. But I've got I have phone calls set up with that firm tomorrow, pending approval of their proposal tonight, and I'll have a better understanding as of probably tomorrow how quickly we can work on those first 3 critical structures. And then we can have an idea of moving on from there.
Mayor, may I ask a quick, Chase?
Yes, sir.
First of all,
Yes, sir.
Chase, I appreciate your comments and I support your position. I'm sure the board's position as well. And I know that the council and I'm sure the public do have a lot of questions, and they're going to have a lot of questions. But until you get some of the engineering information back, it's probably going to be impossible to answer specific technical questions. And I get all that. I guess the one question that I do have that kind of goes back a bit is in a project like this, I would think that there would be multiple layers of approvals, that when a set of plans is designed for a project of this scale, that there'd be another engineer that would have to sign off on that set of plans. And then perhaps even the state would have to sign off on a set of plans. Is that the case in this project?
Well, on a project of this magnitude, when unfortunately for the structural design, Councilmember Lesby, the answer is really the only oversight is the internal QA/QC controls within GRW itself. When they send that to Georgetown Municipal, which we did a review through the months of November and December of last year, myself and staff pretty much locked ourselves in the conference room with a couple of boxes of red pens, and we marked up all the contract documents, spent an enormous amount of time. The issue is we don't have any structural engineers on staff here. And so as far as knowing reinforcing steel bar diameter, spacing, thickness of walls, we're 100% reliant on the consultant. That's why we have a consultant. We marked up structural drawings, and there were even some comments without knowing how those calculations are done just from experience. I've looked back at our handwritten comments, and we did make some notes that said, hey, this steel looks light. These thicknesses on slabs, on walls, this is not what we're used to seeing on structures of this type. But we were assured through that QA/QC process that they were sufficient and that they were designed correctly. As far as once it goes to the state, Kentucky Division of Water is really only reviewing process, which is what we can review here. And there's unfortunately not a review that's looking at the subdiscipline designs such as electrical, structural, mechanical, things of that nature. Really, the review process is the wastewater treatment process. That's what gets reviewed.
Okay. So I guess going forward, that's where I guess the forensic engineering will come into play. And that's what we're having done at this time then, right?
That's correct. This is a firm that was recommended by our council. They've worked with this firm before. They're a national firm, and they specialize in forensic structural engineering. These are the guys you call generally after something bad has happened. They go and investigate, but at least this time we've been made aware, to GRW's credit, before anything happened. And they're going to go in and do a very thorough review and give me the answers that I need so I can sit down with GRW and figure out an action plan.
Okay.
Again, recommended by our council. Said these guys are outstanding. These men and women, they know what they're doing. They're not scared of the inside of a courtroom, and this is what they do. So we feel like we have the right firm. We actually reached out to 3 other heavyweights in the wastewater industry, and they all, with their structural engineers, they actually declined to work with us on this. They didn't feel that this was something that was going to be worthwhile for their firms long term. So we had to go this forensic route that specializes in things that have gone wrong.
Well, I don't know a whole lot about them, but honestly, it gives me confidence hearing what you're saying. So that's reassuring at this point, that they have that level of knowledge. I'm surprised, however, that there wasn't another structural checkpoint along the way. Not with you all. I understand that you can't have an engineer for every single situation, but I'm surprised somewhere along the line, even with GRW, that there wasn't a second or a third review, or that the state doesn't do that. Just my not being familiar with the process, that on a $50 million project, that wouldn't somehow happen along the way. But that is what it is.
It's very frustrating that we're in this situation. My experience when I worked in consulting, I don't know how something like this happens. There was never a day that even before I was licensed as an engineer that I could send anything out to a client that wasn't independently reviewed. That was just a QA/QC practice and principle of the firm that I worked for, and I would think that's very standard. Obviously, this is something that fell through the crack at GRW in a bad way.
Why don't we why don't we go ahead and hear the proposal?
Yes, sir. Again, our final order of business, kind of what I've already talked about. This is a firm, Janney Elsner, WJE, and this retains them as our independent review engineer, and they're going to work directly for us. The price proposal that you have is for $184,000. We've actually negotiated that down to $160,000, but we have 16 structures on the project. We have narrowed that down to 7 structures that we feel might be affected, and this is for review of in-depth review and recommendations on those 7 structures. This is what we need to get this moving forward. So that's our final bit of business for council tonight, and this is something we will be seeking reimbursement from GRW.
Mayor, I'll make that recommendation. I do have just a quick follow-up question for Chase, though. In regards to the 7 structures, are these like seven swimming pools? Essentially, they're kind of stacked beside each other. Is that an analogy that would be close?
One of the structures, correct. It would be like 7. It'd be like 4 very, very large swimming pools side by side, kind of in a square fashion. That's the main treatment structure. That's called the sequencing batch reactor, and it has 4 large chambers. That's the main one where we are worried. That's one of the 3 we need to get reviewed to get back on schedule.
Okay. And Chase.
Second, Mayor.
I totally support your efforts, Chase. We can only move forward. It is what it is. We just have to deal with it and move on. So anyway.
I agree, Mayor, and I give you the second.
Thank you, Connie. And David, point well taken. Chase, there was some consideration of three structures first, was the decision to go ahead and do the full 7. Okay. Motion's been made and seconded. And I know that what Chase and the GMWSS Board of Commissioners has done here is react to this as professionally as they can with full disclosure to the Board of Commissioners and to the council. And I'm sure that will be the case going forward as well. So with that said, if there are no other questions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Thank you.
Mayor, I appreciate it. Thank you for giving me so much time tonight, and to the council members that had already reached out, your support is very appreciated, and we'll get this figured out for you.
Thanks, Chase. Let's see here. Chase was on there long enough that I got my paperwork mixed up. Item 8 on our agenda under City Attorney is first reading of the Animal Control Ordinance that was mentioned earlier. Essentially, what we have is a situation where in the city, we have attempted to let code enforcement handle animal control situations rather than law enforcement. And what's happened is it hasn't worked. So this ordinance essentially takes us back from civil action about these matters to criminal charges about these matters. And it gives animal control the tools that they need. They still have these tools in the county, and it's their belief that they could do a better job in the city if they had those same tools back. So this ordinance gives them those tools back. Devin, is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I'll just expound on that just a little bit. So our code enforcement personnel were not enforcing civilly. The animal control officers who are under our interlocal agreement employed by the county were tasked with enforcing both in the city and the county. And if you'll recall, recently the county passed passed an ordinance and that allowed those officers to enforce criminally. Ours, on the other hand, we originally had it criminal, went back to civil, thinking we'll treat this through the code enforcement process. We'll issue notices of violation, citations, allow the code enforcement board to hear appeals. It sounded very clean, but we've heard from animal control personnel that in practice, it's not as practical because animals are living, moving creatures. And unlike tall grass, violations can't be tied to property as easily. So that was the impetus for this. And I know Ms. Miller's had some issues and has communicated with animal control. And animal control recommends that in order to enforce this code, we're not changing any of our provisions. We're simply changing the enforcement mechanism. So while it was illegal to harbor a vicious animal in city limits, it's still illegal to harbor a vicious animal. We just have a different mechanism for enforcing that provision. So I'd be glad to answer any questions later after I do the first reading, but I also can note that criminal enforcement sounds a little heavy, but for example, the most common offense, there's a written violation first. So before these people are given a violation or any kind of penalty, there's a written notice. Where somebody doesn't clean up their dog's waste, they're not going to jail. So there are varying levels of enforcement. So I'd be glad to talk more about that later, but I'll go ahead and do first reading. An ordinance amending Chapter 6 of the Georgetown Code of Ordinances related to animals. Summary. Delete section 6-21, which provides for local permits, fees, and fines related to commercial animal establishments, animal shelters, animal training, kennels, and certain other uses. 2, amend section 6-30 to provide for criminal enforcement of animal-related provisions contained in Chapter 6, as opposed to enforcement through civil processes. and provides the minimum and maximum penalties for violation of each section. 3, provides for repeal of inconsistent ordinances, severability of provisions, and an effective date upon passage and publication. The full text of this ordinance is available for examination in the city clerk's office, 100 North Court Street, Georgetown, Kentucky 40324, or at www.georgetownky.gov. Introduced and publicly read for the first time, October 25th, 2021.
Thank you, Devin. And the sponsors of this ordinance are Mr. Stone and Mr. Showalter.
Mayor, can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Devin, what if this ordinance passes? Will this mirror exactly what is happening in the county?
I haven't reviewed every single violation that they've included, but as far as enforcement, yes. It would be enforced through violations, misdemeanors, depending on the violation. So I will note also that Andrew, Rand Marshall, Joe Pat, and animal control personnel, we all sat down together to try to understand why they were having issues enforcing our code and city limits. And that's where we reached this result. So Rand is on board with it. And I will note that since the county has passed their ordinance, I think the number of actual misdemeanors that they've taken through the court process is like 2. And the reason for that being that this kind of enforcement where you can write a written notice or there's just a violation, certain things are just a violation, that really makes it a more compliance-minded way to do it as opposed to penalty-minded. So it gives them the tools they need, but it's not something where we're going to have hundreds of people rolling through the court system because their dog escaped the leash. It gives us that tool where there's a vicious animal or a wild animal being harbored, or people are just not being responsible. But for your typical light offenders, people are not going to be seeing full-on criminal enforcement.
Devin, just a quick question, if the mayor will allow.
Yes, ma'am.
It's just a practical matter. Let's say I have a violation that I want to report. Now, do I go to the police? Do I still go through code enforcement, or what's the mechanism?
No, and Mayor stated it correctly in the civil to criminal distinction, but animal control is its own department, and no matter what, they will act as the citation officers. So it won't go through the code enforcement appeals process in that board, but it also won't go through GPD. I mean, you can still call dispatch to report the offense. I think people do that in really severe cases, but animal control is its own department and will accept those complaints.
Okay, thank you.
Question. There's
Yes,
something
ma'am.
on there. There was something on there about kennels. What was that about the kennels?
Yes, I was going to come back to that. Thank you. So the provisions that are being deleted, actually, we reviewed all this, and we frequently go through our code and find things that have never ever been done. At first we created these provisions for permitting for commercial animal establishments and things like that, and we've never in the history of Georgetown issued a permit for that. So we thought to take it off the books. I know the state has provisions. There are other regulatory agencies that monitor those organizations. So it was kind of one of those, we never issue permits for this anyways. Why would we keep it on our books?
So like the vet's office, we have a couple of them that are actually located in town. I think one of them's outside the city limits. So do they have kennels considered kennels, or are they different because of the type of business they are?
I would say that some vets offices would qualify as kennels. I think it's one of those, not all vets offices are kennels, but I think that's where I'm referring to. There's higher regulatory power than the city of Georgetown. So I think it's just kind of redundant for us to ask for a permit when.
So you're saying it falls into another category or another supervision.
Right. They already are under the tutelage of the veterinary board and other agencies. So there's really no sense in us permitting them.
Well, I heard something about, and I just heard this in passing about something about like the lady that has the ponies, Rosie's ponies, that comes into town, that she used to come into town and do Bible schools and all that kind of different stuff, that she couldn't anymore because of our ordinance. Is that true or not true?
honestly don't know anything about that. I'd be glad to look into it. If you can get me any more information. What part of our ordinance prohibited her from operating?
That's why
There
I'm
is a-
asking, because I
There is a
wasn't.
part of our ordinance. It's been on the books for a long, long time that talks about like traveling animal shows.
Mhm.
And I don't think that's being changed here. But that's a holdover from a long time ago. If you want us to review that, we can, but I think that's the kind of provision that would prohibit something like that.
I mean, that might be something to look at. I know she's local, and to bring hers into town, but of course she's not talked to me, but that's just when I had heard somebody else say that. And then, even when we do the Festival of the Horse, if we're giving pony rides and things like that, kind of how does that fall into our ordinance that we have? So since we're looking at the ordinance, it's something else to look at.
Yeah, and Karen, I'm looking at the provision that we've deleted and Andrew referenced. We do, this is the section where it says that you would require a permit for a circus, a petting zoo, things like that. So I guess our reasoning for taking it off the books is that we've never issued a permit for that in the first place. Why start now? I think, so maybe she was saying it was cost prohibitive for her, thinking that she needed that permit. But I mean, to my knowledge, we never have required a permit for horses in the Festival of the Horse aside from our regular. So that could be the provision she was talking about. But like I said, we've never done that in the past. And that was the reason we said, let's just pull this provision.
Okay.
Okay, then that will constitute first reading of the ordinance. And we thank our citizen for being with us and showing the interest in getting this ordinance passed. What we do is actually council will vote on the ordinance at its second reading, which will be at our next regularly scheduled meeting. Then the ordinance becomes effective upon its publication after the council votes.
Excuse me, Mayor, may I speak for 1 second?
Yes, ma'am.
So I want to thank all of you for listening, just a regular person, but this is so interesting to me to be in this, and both my grandchildren were in on it a little bit too. So I want to thank you for letting me into your Zoom and making my voice heard, I guess, the officer's voice also. So thank you all.
We appreciate you as well, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 9 on our agenda is from under finance is a quarterly finance report, and Stacy and I talked this afternoon, and she typically would schedule this presentation at our next council meeting. We've got 2 of our revenue categories that aren't complete because we're still expecting that information to come in. So I'd like to pass on that quarterly financial report, and we'll have it at the next meeting when it's more complete. Item 10 on your agenda under city engineer is a municipal order for street dedications in Sutton Place. And I believe those are straightforward and meet our specifications, and we accept a motion for approval.
Motion, Mayor.
Second.
Thank you, Mark. Second, Connie, thank you. If there are no questions about that, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Thank you. Under cemetery, we have a municipal order approving some surplus property items, and I do not have that list in front of me, but it is in your all's packet.
2 John Deere tractors, or 2 John Deere Gators.
Okay, 2 Gators. Okay, good. Well, I'm sure we've gotten our money's worth out of them if we're getting ready to declare them. Was that a motion, Connie?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mayor, I'll second.
Thank you, Ray. If there are no questions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Thank you. That gets us down to item 12 on our agenda, which is something we've really been looking forward to. Under Chief Administrative Officer, we're finally going to have the presentation on net profits versus gross receipts tax. And if I could, just a couple of comments before Andrew actually starts the video for us to watch. All of you have been sent an email link with this video. The hope is, the intention is, once we can watch the video tonight publicly, then it will kind of be in the public domain and it can be very easily shared. And that's our hope and expectation, is that it will be widely shared. So what we've been working on with some of my input, but what Andrew and Stacy and others have done a lot of work on, is to continue our 3-year effort to look at data and see what that data means for the city of Georgetown. And so we've made good progress with that, and the council's taken some significant actions because of that data. But with this presentation tonight, we're able to begin a new phase of discussion. We've kind of talked about presenting this to you for a while. I'm sorry it took so long. We had to talk about it so long before we could actually bring this to the public. But we were seeking some important feedback from some partners and other folks. And for the very small group of folks that were able to preview the video for us, I'd like to thank them for their constructive criticism. And that was very helpful to us, because all of this, it turns out, is a learning process. And we're certainly learning as we go. The focus of the discussion now, I hope, can shift to the inequities of our net profits tax and the inequities of the outcomes of the tax, the outcomes in Georgetown, and what our data shows us about the outcomes of the net profits tax in Georgetown. And it also contrasts that information with one possible solution. It gives something to contrast and compare with. But I'd first like to, before we show the video to the council and any of the public watching, just set the stage a little bit in terms of, there's a lot of data here. There's a lot of information, and there's just a whole lot of content here. But I think it's important that I tell you up front and tell our audiences up front what it is not, or what it's not intended to be. It's not intended to cast small versus large. That's not the point. And the point is certainly in this video not to imply that any company has done anything wrong, big or small. Our responsibility as citizens is to pay only the taxes that we are legally required to pay. That's the way it works. And so I want it understood that any comparisons that we make in this video are looking at the outcome that is unfair, not companies doing unfair things. Companies are doing smart business practices. But we think the ordinance needs looking at, and I hope that will be one of the takeaways here. Companies certainly have the legal right to take advantage of whatever tax laws are on the books. It's appropriate that they do so. And they have an obligation, frankly, to their shareholders and the business owners themselves to do those things. Not suggesting anything other than that. But where there's an inequity in the way our ordinance performs, that's what we're talking about. And I also want it real clearly understood, please, that this is not intended to single out any company in Georgetown. It's easy to slip into that trap. It would be inaccurate. Or to think that this applies only to certain categories of business in Georgetown. It doesn't. This is as non-specific as it can get. And then finally, after we watch the video, I'd like to talk with you about what I think next steps might be and what a timeline might be. But I want to assure you, even before you see the video, that our posture at this point is to present this video and then listen and learn. So with that said, Andrew, would you be kind enough to, unless you would like to make a further introduction of the video?
Oh, I think you teed it up nicely. Give me just a moment to get it queued up, and then we'll watch.
Thank you.
I will say, might help. Sometimes when you're watching the video, it can get covered up by the faces on the screen. You can change the view up in the top right corner to the smallest setting, and that might help. I'm not sure how it appears on your end, but if you have that problem, that's how you fix it.
Yeah, up in the upper right corner, there's a view screen. You can click that and you should be able to reduce it down to just the speaker. Where is it set on gallery now?
Join us as we explore an issue that's important to everyone in our community. Today, we're going to be discussing Georgetown's business taxes. We'll explain how net profits taxes work and look at the data from right here in Georgetown to see why we are concerned that the tax is inequitable. Then we'll show you how a properly structured gross receipts tax is a more fair and equitable solution. We encourage you to share this video on social media and tell your friends, family, and neighbors to watch. Our first disclaimer: we can only give you data in the aggregate or anonymously. We are prohibited by civil and criminal law from providing anyone with data that reveals the affairs of a particular taxpayer's business. So if you ask for that information, we'll have to say no. Occupational license taxes, which take the form of payroll taxes for employees and net profits or gross receipts taxes for businesses, are a charge for the privilege of working in or conducting a business within the city. Over 70 years ago, the highest court in the Commonwealth held that operating a business in the city is a special privilege, not a right common to all persons, and that the city can charge a tax for this privilege proportional to the business's revenues. Let's look at the net profits tax in action. Friendly Company operates a business in Georgetown selling popsicles. If in a single year it sold 100,000 popsicles at $1 each, it would have $100,000 in gross receipts. We may use this term synonymously with revenues, sales, or income. In that same year, Friendly Company had business expenses like rent, supplies, and payroll totaling $70,000. When we subtract those expenses from its gross receipts, we calculate that Friendly Company had net profits of $30,000. Net profits means a business's gross receipts minus its business expenses. Hold on to that number for now. Now assume Friendly Company also has locations in New York and Hong Kong, where it had additional revenues of $3 million. Together with Georgetown's receipts, Friendly Company had global gross receipts of $3.1 million. To calculate the net profits tax Friendly Company owes to Georgetown, we first take Friendly's $100,000 of local receipts and divide it by its global gross receipts to get its apportionment. What this means is that 3.2% of Friendly's global net profits is taxable to Georgetown. Note that we have simplified this calculation to assume that Friendly's payroll and sales apportionments are equal, as the statute requires us to average the two to get true apportionment. Next, we calculate Friendly's global net profits by subtracting its global expenses from its global receipts. Worldwide, Friendly had global net profits of $600,000. We multiply that by its apportionment to find that $19,200 of Friendly's net profits are taxable by Georgetown. Finally, we multiply the taxable net profits by the rate of 1% to find that Friendly Company owes Georgetown $192 in net profits taxes. Note how Georgetown taxes a portion of Friendly's global net profits, rather than taxing the actual net profits generated in Georgetown. In our example, if Friendly Company only operated in Georgetown, it would owe Georgetown 56% more net profits tax. The law is established this way because it is difficult to accurately attribute business expenses of a multi-location company to a single location. But it means that the tax Friendly owes to Georgetown is dependent on how well or how poorly it performs in New York and Hong Kong. It also means that Friendly's investments in those other locations gives it a tax break in Georgetown. This begins to illustrate one of the inequities we have identified with the net profits tax. There is tax inequity between local businesses and global businesses. Now let's look at actual tax returns from the businesses that generated positive receipts in Georgetown in the year 2018. We'll use that data to help you understand how the size and geographic diversity of a business affects how much tax it owes to Georgetown in relation to its local revenues. We divided the entities doing business in Georgetown into three categories based on annual global receipts. Small businesses are those that earn less than $1 million in annual global receipts. 65% of the businesses generating revenues in Georgetown are small businesses. Businesses that generate between $1 million and $100 million in revenues annually are called small to medium enterprises and constitute roughly a fourth of the businesses operating in Georgetown. 11% of the businesses in Georgetown are large enterprises, those with greater than $100 million in annual revenues. There were 3,245 businesses that generated positive revenues in Georgetown in 2018. On average, small businesses do over 70% of their global business in Georgetown. This means that most small businesses are based in Georgetown, and many, if not most, of their customers live or work in Georgetown. Contrast this to large enterprises, which average only 1% of their global receipts in Georgetown. In fact, most large enterprises did less than 0.1% of their global business in Georgetown. These are primarily publicly traded national and global companies doing business in big box retail trade, oil and gas, transportation and warehousing, pharmaceuticals, wholesale trade, online retail and services, food and beverages, manufacturing, finance and insurance, and professional scientific and technology work. The average large enterprise generated $5 billion in annual global revenues. For scale, that's 377 times more revenue than small businesses and small to medium enterprises combined. Now imagine you have two buckets. In one bucket, we'll put the revenues generated by all businesses of all sizes in Georgetown. In the other, let's put the net profits taxes owed by all businesses in Georgetown. Small businesses generated only 1.4% of the total local revenues. However, they owed 23.6% of the total net profits taxes. Small to medium enterprises generated 6.3% of the total local revenues, but they owed 39.3% of the total net profits taxes. Large enterprises generated $12.1 billion in local revenues, or 92% of the local revenues generated. These large enterprises, however, owed only 37.1% of the total net profits owed by all businesses of all sizes. Now you can begin to understand another inequity in Georgetown's net profits tax. there is tax inequity between small and large businesses. In 2018, the total revenues generated in Georgetown by businesses of every size was $13.1 billion. All businesses together owed the city $1.7 million in net profits taxes. That means the average business in Georgetown owed the city a net profits tax of 13 cents for every $1,000 in revenues generated in Georgetown. With this average figure in mind, you can see the inequity in the net profits tax. For every $1,000 of revenue small businesses generate in Georgetown, they pay on average $2.25 in net profits taxes. In comparison, while generating the same $1,000 in revenue, large enterprises pay an average of only 5 cents in net profits taxes. That means for every $1,000 in receipts, small businesses pay 45 times as much net profits tax as large enterprises. What's happening here? Here's another way to understand it. Every dollar a business earns can be divided into two portions. One that is taxable as net profits, and the other that is non-taxable as a deductible business expense. As businesses get larger, the portion of their gross receipts that is offset by non-taxable business expenses gets higher. We could spend days exploring why, but that isn't necessary. It's simply a fact that larger businesses are offsetting more of their revenues than small businesses. Georgetown's net profits tax is what's known as a regressive tax, or one that takes a larger percentage of income from low-income groups than from high-income groups. Here comes a critical fact. Of the 3,245 businesses that generated positive revenue in the city, 994 businesses didn't pay the city a single penny in net profits taxes. That's 30% of all the businesses. And those 994 businesses had combined global revenues of $706 billion. That's almost $750 billion in a single year. These businesses generated $10.5 billion in Georgetown, which is 87% of the total local receipts from all businesses. How is this possible, you ask? These businesses claimed expenses of equal to or greater than their revenues. Because they show a net profits of $0, they aren't required to pay the city a penny in net profits taxes. If you go back to the principle of a business tax being a charge upon the privilege of operating within the city, these businesses aren't paying their fair share. We won't go into detail, but here's how the rest of the businesses in Georgetown paid net profits taxes. Taxing businesses on their net profits creates a third inequity. One between businesses and their employees. Meet Sarah. She's a shift manager at ABC Company, which pays her an annual salary of $60,000. Sarah has 3 kids, one in college, a mortgage, car payment, and pays $100 a month for family health insurance, plus all the other taxes and expenses she incurs. Sarah can't deduct any of these expenses from her salary before paying Georgetown's 1% payroll tax. She owes Georgetown $600 in payroll tax, even if she spends every penny supporting her family. Regardless of Sarah's income, be it $60,000, $600,000, or $6 million, her tax will always be exactly 1% of her gross wages. That is the cost to Sarah of the privilege of working in Georgetown, of having police, fire, EMS, 911, road maintenance, and other vital city services available to her. Her employer, ABC Company, has annual global revenues of $35 billion and local receipts of $105 million. It reported global expenses of $34,975 million, meaning it reported global net profits of only $25 million. Only 0.3% of that net profit is apportioned to Georgetown, meaning the company had net profits of $75,000 in Georgetown. ABC Company owes Georgetown 1% of that figure, or $750. While Sarah must pay exactly 1% of her earnings, ABC Company pays only 0.0000075, or 7,500 thousandths of a percent of its local revenues. If you think this sounds like made-up numbers, we can assure you this is based on an actual tax return here in Georgetown at a business you might pass every day and probably patronize regularly, and we can assure you that this fact pattern is very common in the city. Is it fair that Sarah must pay a tax on gross earnings, but ABC Company gets to deduct all its expenses? Under state law, the city can't tax Sarah on her net profits, only on her gross receipts. We've talked about the inequities in Georgetown's net profits tax. Now let's talk about a solution. We can't change the way net profits taxes are calculated because that's set by state law, and fiddling with the rates for different sized businesses doesn't fix the inequities. As you might have guessed, we believe the answer lies in taxing businesses on their gross receipts rather than their net profits, albeit at a significantly lower rate. Let us show you why we think this is a great solution. While there are many ways to structure a gross receipts tax, we set out to do so with two goals in mind. It must be more equitable, and it must increase overall revenues to the city, since the city has a demonstrated and well-documented need for additional revenues. While this presentation is not intended to be a lesson on tax policy, which is complex and widely debated, we do think it's necessary to explain the three basic tax structures. We've already showed you that a regressive tax, such as our net profits tax, is one that takes a larger percentage of income from low-income groups than from high-income groups. The more money you make, the smaller the percentage of your earnings you pay in taxes. A progressive tax is the opposite of a regressive tax. It takes a larger percentage of income from high-income groups than from low-income groups. Federal income taxes are an example of a progressive tax. A proportional tax takes the same percentage of income from all income groups. Georgetown's payroll tax is a proportional tax. Here's a disclaimer. There are many economic theories about progressive versus regressive taxes, and whether a proportional tax is just a regressive tax in disguise. The debates have been waged for decades, and there are staunch advocates and skeptics on both sides. Ours is but one approach. We're going to help you understand why we think it is the one for Georgetown. This proposed tax is undeniably progressive, but it has elements of a regressive tax to protect against the tax being considered confiscatory, which is prohibited by the Kentucky Constitution. The tax structure we are recommending is actually a hybrid. It is both a progressive and a regressive tax. Small businesses and small to medium enterprises enjoy the benefit of the lower rates of a progressive tax. Large enterprises pay a higher percentage of their income to taxes, but only up to the point of the cap, after which the tax becomes regressive and the business sees a gradual reduction in per-income tax. We are recommending this structure for the following reasons. First, small businesses and small to medium enterprises will benefit from lower tax rates. As we will show you next, small businesses will on average see significant tax reductions versus their net profits taxes. Second, a proportional tax is often proportional in concept and regressive in practice. Small businesses, like low-income individuals, tend to spend proportionally more of their income on essentials like rent, utilities, and payroll, and therefore accumulate less net worth than large businesses. Third, implementing a proportional gross receipts tax at the rate necessary to bring Georgetown sufficient additional revenues requires we do one of two things. Set a rate that will result in a tax increase for half of all small businesses and 80% of small to medium enterprises, or increase the cap for large enterprises, which will tend to affect only one business. Our proposed change is a gross receipts tax with a tiered rate and a cap of $500,000 in taxes owed. Small businesses would pay a rate of 25,000% of gross receipts, or 25 cents per $1,000 of local receipts. Small to medium enterprises would pay a rate of 75,000% of gross receipts, or 75 cents per $1,000 of local revenues. Large enterprises would pay a rate of 175 thousandths of a percent of receipts, or $1.75 per $1,000 of local gross receipts. Switching to the proposed gross receipts tax will increase the city's business tax revenues by an average of $3.5 million annually versus the average net profits tax from the last 4 years. It will also make this city's business tax revenues easier to forecast. Let's look at the impact on small businesses from the switch to the proposed gross receipts tax. 64% of small businesses would pay the same or less taxes under the gross receipts tax. Of those businesses that will pay less, the average net profits tax owed was $303. The average gross receipts tax owed under the proposed tax would be $20, a reduction of $283. Thus, most small businesses would see a significant tax savings due to the switch. Of those businesses that would pay more, 90%, that's 686 businesses, owed $0 in net profits taxes. The average business owed only $2 in net profits taxes. The average gross receipts tax owed under the proposed tax would be $24. 65% of these businesses would see an increase of less than $10. The highest net profits tax owed by a small business was $7,915. The maximum any small business could owe under the proposed gross receipts tax is $250. That small business would have saved $7,665. Let's do the same analysis for small to medium enterprises. 34% of small to medium enterprises would owe less under the proposed gross receipts tax. Of those that would owe less, the average net profits tax owed was $2,216. The average gross receipts tax owed under the proposed tax would be $651, a decrease of $1,565. Of those that would owe more under a gross receipts tax, 37%, or 190 businesses, owed $0 in net profits taxes. The average business owed $183. Under the proposed tax, the average gross receipts tax owed by businesses that would pay more is $889, a $705 increase. The highest net profits tax owed by a small to medium enterprise was $232,711. Because the maximum any small to medium enterprise could owe under the proposed gross receipts tax is $75,000, that business would have saved $157,711 in taxes owed. A closer look shows the average impact on large enterprises isn't as heavy as it might appear. 91% of large enterprises will owe more under the proposed gross receipts tax. Of those that would owe more, 34% owed $0 in net profits taxes. The large enterprises that paid no net profits taxes generated 87% of the local revenues generated by all large enterprises. Those 112 large enterprises had combined local revenues of $10.5 billion. Of those businesses that would owe more under the proposed gross receipts tax, the average business owed $1,763 in net profits taxes. The average gross receipts tax owed would be $14,081, a $12,318 increase. However, out of all large enterprises, 57% would owe less than $1,000, 81% would owe less than $5,000, and 89% would owe less than $15,000. The highest net profits tax owed by a large enterprise was $102,764. Note that this is less than half of the highest net profits tax owed by a small to medium enterprise. The maximum any large enterprise could owe under the proposed gross receipts tax is $500,000. Only 2 businesses would have hit the $500,000 cap in 2018. Let's go back to this slide, and now expand it to see what switching to the proposed gross receipts tax does. See first that everyone will pay something. It means 45% of all businesses will pay less than $10 in gross receipts taxes. 74% of all businesses will pay less than $100. And 92% will pay less than $1,000. Let's summarize. We showed you that the current net profits tax is inequitable because it impacts businesses disproportionately based on size and geographical diversity. Almost a third of the businesses operating in Georgetown are not paying the city any net profits taxes. We proposed a gross receipts tax that is fair and equitable and showed you how it will reduce taxes for most small businesses and many small to medium enterprises. Everyone will pay something. Employers and their employees will be taxed equitably. The city will see about $3.5 million in additional annual revenues and will be able to better predict business revenues year to year. We've hit you with a lot of data. We encourage you to watch this several times. If you hear any concerns in the community, ask folks to watch this video first so we can have important conversations armed with facts. Cheers, everyone.
As the credits run out there. Okay, I can see you all again. Thank you. I had to switch back to gallery view because I missed you. Thank you very much for your attention to that. And Andrew, thank you for a good job on putting all of that data together. Now you see what I meant about the volume of data and the fact that this link needs to be shared so that others have the opportunity to watch it at their leisure, pause it, look at a chart, and but we think we've identified an inequity. We know we've identified an inequity with our net profits tax, and we've presented that. Our next steps, I think, are to, I've mentioned listen and learn. My next steps will be, and I think this ball is in my court right now, so I want y'all to relax. I have asked to appear before Scott United, before the Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, and the Scott County Industrial Forum. And all of those are scheduled. So I'll speak to Scott County United this Wednesday afternoon at 4 o'clock at the library. They're going to meet in person for this purpose. Everyone keep in mind that Scott United meetings are open to the public. Not many people attend, but they are open to the public for anyone that's interested in attending. We'll show them the video and then have a conversation with that group of community leaders. I'm also scheduled for the Scott Industrial Forum on November 17th. I think their meetings are private, but it was almost simultaneous. I was asking to meet with them, and they were requesting my presence just about at the same time. So that'll be a good audience for me to appear before, and then the Chamber of Commerce as well. I think we're at the beginning stages of a conversation, and Andrew and I won't give him all the credit. I'm involved in this as well, with guidance and direction, and it's kind of a team effort. But Andrew's presented us with some very provocative information that I think warrants us looking at and talking about. But I think we should take our time, and I'll be engaged in talking with community groups until at least Thanksgiving. An ordinance to put something like this into place doesn't even exist at this point, because we haven't gotten the feedback that we're seeking. So I will be interested in your all's comments and feedback, and anybody you'd like to share this link with, please do so. Any group that would like to talk with us about it, that's what this process is. And I think after you've seen the video now, you get a better feel for my comments about my problem is with the outcome of the ordinance. It's not with any of our local businesses. And I think that's a really important point to make. So if there are any questions tonight, I'll be glad to take them, or I'll be glad to quit wearing it out and move on to the next item on the agenda. Which, by the way, is council comments. So just a question of where shall I begin tonight? I think I'll start in the upper right-hand corner, and Connie Tackett, that is you tonight.
Mayor, again, very, very good information to continue to look at and soak up to learn more about. I appreciate the ordinance for about the animals. I think that they do need to have more authority where they're at, the animal shelter. They do a great job. And I appreciate everything that Chase brought tonight too. Other than that, I don't have anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. Tammy?
I'd like to say I really do appreciate the presentation. I thought it was very well done, and it's a lot to digest, but it's presented in a manner that, you know, we can go back and look at, and I appreciate that. I also appreciate the fact that we'll be able to share it with people who ask, because I have had questions, and there's no way that I could explain it as well as it's been explained here. So I appreciate that. I also appreciate that we're taking our time with this, and that you know, we're trying to get information from all parties, because I think that's important that we understand ramifications across all businesses. And so thank you for that. Also, I would like to say that the information about the GRW and the water situation, that was tough to hear, and I imagine it's tough to deal with. But, mistakes happen, and I appreciate the work that's being done to move forward there. And that's it for tonight.
Okay, thank you, Tammy. Karen?
I have just a couple of things. Something I heard, and I haven't followed up to try to figure out how to follow it up, but on the COVID money that we would be receiving out of Texas, there was a watchdog group that has noticed in Texas, when they were divvying the money out to the counties and the cities like we've done too, that there was a line in there about mandates that if the cities, counties accepted the money and spent the money, then they would be under the mandates of all the mandates of the president. Have you seen anything like that in it or not? Meaning it that would be the vaccines and all the things that the president's mandated for our employees. And even the contract, they even said that the contractors, that if we have a project work that it's COVID money, then even the project contractors would all have to be following the mandates. have you seen any of that language in it or not?
I have not. I'm unaware of any provisions of that type.
And Karen, I've been talking to KLC some about this as well, because
Okay.
some of that guidance is still being fleshed out. A lot of the ties on the mandates are often related to whether a state has signed on to a FEMA, and I cannot put my finger on the name of it. It's a FEMA program, and whether the state has signed on to that program might dictate whether they have to follow the mandate or testing requirements. But I am in communication with KLC to follow that.
Okay. Well, I figured if it's something that Texas is having to do or looking into, that if any of that is factual, then that would be something we'd all have to be doing. So thank you. If you'll just give me any information if you find it.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's it.
Thanks, Karen. Greg.
Thanks, Mayor. Just a couple of things. First of all, Chase, thanks for the explanation on the wastewater one situation right now. We really appreciate that. And, you know, for me, I've got full confidence in you in handling this. Secondly, the presentation, Mayor Andrew, that was, you know, really good presentation. That's a lot to put into 24, 25 minutes. It's a lot to digest. And I think it's going to take watching it, you know, several times from everyone to really grasp the concepts of it. So I look forward to being able to explain that to everyone that I come in contact with. And Mayor, I appreciate the time frame that you've given us to really get the word out and make sure everyone understands this. Thank you.
Thank you. Willow?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I want to thank Eddie for right before the lines got painted downtown to paying attention to getting the remeasuring done. And I've already heard from Ann Hall that she can get out of her car with her walker, and the spacing seems much more adequate. So thank you for following up on that so quickly. Also, thank you for revising the ARPA fund calendar. And do we know, once people follow the links and if they have input, how will that input be collected for us all?
Andrew, would you like to answer?
Yeah. So the intent is to take public comments. It says through November, at the end of November, but likely we'll continue to take them through the end of the year. The second piece of public input was a planned public hearing where people, essentially a meeting, whether it's a meeting of this body or just a meeting that the council can attend, opportunities, a meeting dedicated solely to allowing the public to speak and put their comments on the record. And then the idea is we take all of that, we take their comments submitted through the survey. The survey really gives anyone full opportunity to submit their ideas. They can both say, these are our preferences of the things that we can do. These are our preferences, what we'd like to see you do. Here also is a written statement of what we'd like to see you do. So they'll get that opportunity, they'll get the public hearing, and then our job is to take all of those ideas and summarize them and present them to council at another meeting. And then the idea would be the council would take that list and any list that we have, any projects that we have or initiatives that we had that we think you ought to consider, and rank those. And we start putting preliminary budget numbers to that and start bringing it to you. It doesn't have to all happen in one budget year, mind you. I mean, we can bring some projects next spring, the spring after that, fall. So we'll have time. And in the meantime, we hope to also get some more information on the second year of lost revenues, if there are any.
Okay, thank you. And thank you to Chase and Andrew for terrific presentations of very complex topics tonight, and for the mayor's work on it as well.
Thanks, Willow. Todd?
Thank you, sir. Great job by you and your staff for the presentation. And Chase, thanks for all your hard work on that, updating that major project. The first thing I've got is for Devin, the animal ordinance. Will that include help for the police department as far as all of the barking dog complaints?
That falls under the noise ordinance, so it doesn't really impact that in any way. But if you would like us to look at enforcement of the barking dogs, I mean, that's just one of those tough ones that, we wanted to do it through code enforcement. Well, code enforcement's not working at night when the dogs are barking, and when you get to a call, the dog stops barking. So that's a tough one. But no, to answer your question, this wouldn't really address that.
Okay, because I've been there and done that, and it's really frustrating over and over and over and over.
I imagine.
Yes. The second thing is that there is a new exhibit at the museum, which is the African American Heritage exhibit through this coming Saturday at the museum. And then the last thing I've got is congratulations to Georgetown Middle School 6th grade football team and Scott County Middle School 8th grade football team for advancing in the state middle school playoffs. So end on a good note there. So that's all I've got.
We'll take it. Thank you, Todd. Mark?
Three items. Chase, thank you for your presentation. It was painful to listen to, but we have to fix the issue or issues. So thank you for that. Mayor, thank you and your staff for the time you took to not only make that presentation, but then to present it to us. So it's a lot to take in. The third item, I'm hesitant about bringing up after that presentation, but I feel like it needs to be said. Late last week, Connie and I met our city engineer at Derby Estates to look at a stormwater issue that's been going on for a long, long time. And while we were at Derby Estates, Eddie showed us a second issue that needs to be addressed in the same subdivision. As we were there looking at the second issue, a homeowner came out and asked what we were doing, and then told us about a third issue in the same subdivision. We're talking about a subdivision that's at least 20 years old. This is not a new subdivision. When the homeowner left, Eddie then told us about issues in other subdivisions, Indian Acres, Indian Hills, which again are old subdivisions that are 50 years or older. These aren't new subdivisions. And then we all know about the issue on Broadway between Clayton Avenue and Rucker Avenue when there's quite a bit of rain, what happens there. So the point in me bringing this up is the mayor and I talked about this after I left Eddie and Connie, and it was an eye-opening experience. And as we move forward, whether it's in the remaining months of this year or if it's in 2022 or 2023, we are going to have to deal with the stormwater issues all over the city. And we can't keep putting that off. And I know that's, I want to use the term, we can't kick the can down the road, but that maybe is not a fair assessment because there is work being done on the issue, but we've got to deal with it. We can't keep turning our cheek and hope the problem goes away, because it's not going to go away until we all address it. And that's what I've got, Mayor. Thank you.
Very well said, Mark. Thank you. David, we saved you for last, David.
That's all right. Thank you, Mayor. Mark, to carry on your comment. I had the opportunity to listen in on the Strand presentation. One of the things that really stuck with me was the fact that we've got $82 million worth of infrastructure that the city is responsible for. That's a lot. That's a huge amount. And the one thing, or a couple things, it's going to fail. It's going to need repair, and a lot of it's inadequate. And we've got to figure out a way to fund that. And in years past, we've absolutely spent either hundreds of thousands of dollars or maybe even millions of dollars a year out of our general fund to take care of these stormwater issues. So you're right. That is something we're going to have to think about, and it goes hand in hand with Mr. Hartley's presentation tonight. Andrew, good job with that. And I want to give Chase some additional support. It doesn't seem like he's been with the water company that long, but goodness, he has had to deal with one major issue after another. And it's unbelievable. I'm sure when he came in here, he had no idea what he was getting into. But I'm glad he's here, and I'm glad he's on our team and helping us navigate through these challenges. So thanks again, Chase. Mr. Hartley, one question I do have, this is the fourth time I've seen the presentation now, and every time I pick up something else. And I know that Greg made the comment about seeing it again. I know Connie's watched a couple times. But taking that lowest rate structure that you have illustrated, which was the 0.0025, I think there were 3 zeros, if I'm not mistaken. So if somebody made $100,000 or a business made $100,000 in profit, no, let me think. Maybe I'm not thinking about that right. I'm probably not comparing apples to apples, because I was thinking if a business made $100,000 in profit, right now they pay 1%, which would be $1,000. But you can't use that percentage on that same amount because it's got to be on the gross amount. So anyway, there goes my theory. Anyway, I assume that we'll be pulling an ordinance from some other community, or maybe you've already done that and kind of use that as a template for whatever we might create.
Yeah, we haven't started there, David, but that will likely be our approach. There are many other cities that do gross receipts taxes, and there are others that have caps, and there are others that have tiered rates and all the concepts that we talked about. So we won't be starting from scratch, but every city is different. So.
Okay. Well, anyway, that's what I was just thinking. I kind of walked through in my mind, and it really wasn't relevant. But anyway, Mayor, thank you for your willingness to go and speak with all the corporate partners in the community. I know that's a big deal. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, David. Okay. Thank you all. That concludes our agenda. Is there anything else to come before the council this evening? If not, thank you very much. We'll stand adjourned.